Sean Tester and Maritza Giorgio, and we want to wish you a very meaningful Martin Luther King Day. Good morning, almost good afternoon, Senator.
Yeah, we're getting close. Yeah, it is good afternoon in the Central and Eastern time zone, so it is good. It's great. I hope everybody is having a great holiday, and it's good.
I've
It's good.
already seen so many of the quotes, the famous quotes and sound bites from Martin Luther King floating around on this day to commemorate him. And it feels like they really carry a lot of extra meaning right now, especially this one that sticks with me always, which is the time is always right to do what is right.
I couldn't have said it better if I'd have said it myself. But Martin Luther King said it, what, probably what, 60, 70 years ago? Yeah, that's what I'd say, because it was long before I got out of high school, and I've been out of high school over 50 years. So,
Okay, sorry.
no,
I
not
accidentally muted myself.
not to date myself. No, I was the one that muted you. Don't worry about it. You didn't do it. I did.
Did you? I
No,
didn't know you had that kind of power.
don't have
Um,
No, you won't let me run the board, so, and for good reason, by the way, so it's
I
good.
won't. Yeah, I won't. I will say, when I my very first trip to Atlanta, when I was working for Scripps, and I went down and my first morning, I woke up and I went down to the Martin Luther King Historical Park down there, and what a magical experience to go into, Old Ebenezer Baptist where he was a preacher, and that whole neighborhood, if you haven't been there, it's so cool, like, it is preserved. I believe Coretta Scott King helped preserve that whole section of Atlanta to really feel and look exactly how it felt when he lived there, and it's a pretty magical experience.
This is where they had the flowing water, is that right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I was there too. I was there with Senator Warnock, by the way, is a minister at Martin Luther King's church now, and has been for some time, and, went down there and, you're right, it's pretty damn impressive, truthfully.
You were there with him?
Yeah, I was with Warnock, yeah, yeah.
Wow. So
Yeah,
I went and I
he, by the way, when he's there in that surroundings of the church, it's not senator, it's reverend.
right. Yeah. I was there and I did the tour of the old church, and then one of the guides said, "Well, you can go to a service."
Yeah.
And so I thought, "Okay." So I actually did. I went to the service the next day, and Senator Warnock was
Really?
it was
Did did
very cool.
did you stand up and give him a "Hell yeah"? Huh?
I didn't say, "Hell yeah." No, not in church.
No, but that's probably good. And they also, by the way, he told me, I've never been on it, but you can also join, by Zoom,
Yes, you
and
can.
yeah,
And when the day I was there, he said a special hello to President Carter
yeah,
because they watched every Sunday, until President Carter's death. So
yeah.
anyway, yeah, a lot to remember here today as we think about Martin Luther King and the lessons from him as we navigate this time in our history. And today it's fitting that we have Dr. Larry Diamond with us. One of the foremost experts on global democracy. He's the Mosbacher Senior Fellow in Democracy at the Freeman Spogli Institute for International Studies, and just a wealth of knowledge and I would say hope too, Senator.
Yeah, I mean, look, he not only, studies democracy and our democracy in this country, but democracies in other countries around the world. And, some that have been able to keep their democracies and other countries that have lost it and what has gone into that, whole thing. But in the 2024 election, the presidential in particular, democracy was a big topic. And, it tends to still be a big topic because what's going on right now, in my opinion, is pretty counter to the country that I grew up in from a standpoint of freedom and privacy and civil liberties. But we'll get into it with him and talk to him about what he sees in the United States and talk about, uh, you know, what we should be concerned about and how we should be moving forward.
Okay, so let's do a few headlines on this holiday Monday. President Trump over the weekend vowing new tariffs on certain EU countries if they don't go along with his plan for the US to buy Greenland. I watched the Sunday shows. I know you did too, Senator. And when asked about the authority to put new tariffs on these countries, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said on Meet the Press, quote, "The national emergency is avoiding a national emergency." Meanwhile, there is some other news happening this morning because the Norwegian Prime Minister's office says that the Prime Minister received a text message from President Trump, and our friends at PBS actually first reported the actual message. You kind of have to see it to believe it. But basically, it says, "Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant, but can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America." He goes on to talk about why Denmark can't protect the land from Russia or China, and why do they have a right of ownership anyway? There are no written documents. It's only that a boat landed there hundreds of years ago. Um, I think maybe we should talk about American history if we're going to talk about.
Yeah, well, and past president and of all the past precedent and all that. Um, I just want to go back to Scott Bessett's comments. It says the national emergency is avoiding a national emergency. Uh, they're going to create a huge, real national emergency if they don't wake up. And if people like Scott Bessett, who, by the way, is not a dope, he's actually fairly sharp, doesn't start doing the right thing here, he's going to create a national emergency, and that's a problem. And using tools as a weapon, or tariffs as a weapon, is not exactly the direction we need to get going. And then I would just like to say on Greenland, who are they kidding? We have the ability right now. It's an American base in Greenland. China and Russia aren't talking about taking Greenland over. We have the ability. Well, I don't know if we still have it, but we had the ability to use Greenland in any way for national defense that we wanted. This is probably a lot like Venezuela when they was talking about drugs, and what we find out it was really about oil. Maybe this is something else. Maybe this is about uh, uh, I don't know. I don't know what it could be about. But the bottom line is it's not about our national defense because we had access, have access. There's a military base here that the United States plays a huge role in, and what's going on here is a different agenda than I think anybody's talking about. And
The other
I, by the way, don't know what that agenda is. I can guess, but no need guessing. It could be about elements. It could be about uh, elements that we need for whatever we're building. But in the end, I think this is really, really, really a bad idea, and there's no basis for doing what the president's doing. The only basis for it is what's in his head, and it's not right.
Good to mention too that that national security strategy that we talked about multiple times now. Greenland's not mentioned in that. So that's something too. Oh, someone's at my door. So I'm gonna hopefully my dog won't bark too much.
Oh,
Um
your dog's giving them out. I hope you're sorry. Not too bad. That's a very big dog.
She's yeah, all 10 pounds of her. Let's move to Minneapolis here. The Pentagon put 1,500 troops on standby to be deployed to Minnesota. Of course, this is following that shooting death of Renee Good by an ICE officer, another shooting a few days later there. We've seen tear gassing vehicles, hurting an infant inside one of those vehicles. The list goes on here. We've learned that the DOJ is also now investigating Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry.
Yeah, they were both on the Sunday. I don't know. No, I don't think Walsh was, but Fry was on the Sunday shows this weekend, and I thought he did a pretty good job explaining what's going on there. It's interesting they're investigating the governor, but they're not investigating the death of Renee Good, which is uh, beyond the pale as far as amazing to me. And look, putting 1,500 troops on the ground and in Minneapolis using the Insurrection Act as a reason why um, is ridiculous. And once again, I've got to say, Maritza, where's Congress? Why are we using taxpayer dollars to pay these guys when in fact they don't exist at all. The president does whatever he wants. They rubber stamp it. Here's another example of it. You know, we've seen a couple of them stand up. Lisa Murkowski on Greenland, Tom Tillis on the Big Beautiful Bill, but for the most part,
And
uh,
Tillis on Greenland too.
and Greenland too. You're right, and Tom on Greenland too. But for the most part, they're all scared of primaries, and they're all thinking somebody else is going to do their job for them. When in fact, they were elected to represent the people that put them in office, and they ought to go out and have some town hall meetings and listen to what the people are saying, because quite frankly, people are not happy with what's going on right now. We took Venezuela and took their president, and now we're going to rebuild Venezuela, and we're going to ignore the challenges that are in this country. Come on. Or we're just going to write a $12 billion check to rural America and hope they shut up. Come on. This is crazy. It's crazy. And then when Walz and Fry, the governor and the mayor in Minneapolis, governor in Minnesota, says people go out, be peaceful, use your phones and video this stuff because it'd be good to have it on the record, then they're the ones that are the terrorists? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Really? What the hell is going on in this country? And
Well, and
isn't Congress stepping up and doing anything? Anything. Man, I got to tell you, this next election is coming up is a big one because the people that are sitting there and did not take their oath of office seriously and do nothing but rubber stamp need to be replaced. Period.
I'm curious to see if any lawmakers speak out about that message to the Prime Minister of Denmark too. I'm sorry, Norway. Norway. We want to say hi to Marilyn from San Antonio. Hi, Marilyn. So the other thing I think that we need to talk about with Minnesota is that over the weekend, on one of the, I think it was Face the Nation, Kristi Noem was on, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, and she really had a confrontational interview with Mark Brennan. And at one point, she said that that the mayor and the governor of Minnesota need to set up protest zones. And the mayor of Minneapolis said, "That's not how the First Amendment works. That's not how this works." So I think that I'm watching my hometown closely this week, and I hope that things stay as calm as possible. But there is just a lot going on. Um, Speaking of that, somewhat related to that, we are learning about a third death in ICE custody, and this is a Oh, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Let's see here. There we go. This is a Nicaraguan man who was arrested in Minneapolis. And this comes after a Cuban immigrant died in the same Texas facility earlier this month during an altercation there. The local medical examiner has indicated that that death may be classified as a homicide. Detainees say he was choked to death by the guards. So there are a lot of questions too. They're detaining people and removing them from the streets. And now we have three deaths in this specific in this specific ICE detention center in Texas.
Yeah, there needs to be oversight. There needs to be accountability, none of which appears to be occurring by Christine Noem or the administration. It's I would say it's unfortunate, but it's much worse than that. I mean, the truth is that these are human lives. They're not animals, and we treat animals better than that. So
Well, this all comes as there's another headline that wasn't talked about, I don't think, on the Sunday shows I watched. But we're going to talk about it here because this is an underlying current to all of this. It's been 1 month since the deadline for the DOJ to release all the files related to Jeffrey Epstein. Just a small, tiny little sliver of those files have been made public. We do have an episode coming up with Ellie Leonard, who is also a Montanan, and she's done a lot of work going through what's already been released. But the fact is, there's a lot more that haven't files that haven't been released. Some are calling this an obstruction of justice, but the big question is who's going to do anything about it?
yeah, that's the big question. As fireworks goes off and flares go up in the air about the fact that these files haven't been released yet when they were supposed to be released. But if this was any other president, regardless of party, uh, Congress would be standing up and saying, "Hey, we passed a law, and your guy's not obeying it. What's going on? Instead, they're talking about bringing in bringing in Clinton and questioning him. What about Trump? Well, he's already had so many questions about the Epstein files. He doesn't have to come before Congress and answer any questions. What a phony bunch of crap. The truth is those files should be released. Truth is I think one of the reasons we went into Venezuela was oil, of course, and then get it off of Epstein. We're talking about Greenland. Nobody's talking about Epstein. We got Minnesota, Minneapolis going on. Nobody's talking about Epstein. The fact is, those files need to be released. The president said he was going to release them. He has not. Congress passed a law. The president signed that law that they'd be released by what, the 20th of December. And now here we are a month later, and they're still not released.
Yeah, but the thing is people are not going silent on this, and there are a lot of people who are keeping it at the forefront, which is good.
Well,
We have
I will be honest with you, Maritza. You brought it up today, and I think it's a good thing to bring up, but I haven't heard a lot about it in the press, mainstream press. I haven't heard a lot, not many folks are talking about Jeffrey Epstein right now because there's so much other stuff to talk.
well, we'll keep talking about it here then.
But
Uh,
you,
that's the beauty of independent media, I guess, right? Jeffrey on our Substack Live says that Congress needs to storm these detention centers. Here's the thing, Jeffrey. People are trying. I believe that they blocked some Minnesota lawmakers from visiting an ICE detention center in the last week. I know that's happened before. There was a lawsuit even over blocking some other lawmakers in other states of these detention centers. So, but yeah, I think oversight, that's part of the job, right, Senator?
that's exactly correct. And by the way, they shouldn't be allowed to block a congressman from going in and looking around. It is part of their job. And when the administration does this kind of stuff, Congress needs to step up and say no and do some things. And remember, they're still controlling the purse strings. They still can do a lot of things that can help pull back the administration when the administration's going rogue. And they've done it before with other presidents. They need to do it and read the Constitution. You know, Article One's job is like Article Two and Article Three, and they are co-equal branches of government. Unfortunately, there seems to be one branch of government right now. It's the executive. The other two are slim and none, and slim just left town.
Okay, well, you're describing the setup of our country, of our democracy, and I think it's a perfect time to say that we want to play our conversation with Larry Diamond, who is a scholar about democracy, not only ours, but the rise and the falls of democracies around the globe. Let's let you listen in now to our chat with Larry Diamond, the democracy scholar, and we'll see you on the other side of this. Thank you for being with us, Professor Diamond.
It's my pleasure.
It is really good to have you on because we get to talk about something that should be near and dear to everybody's heart, and that's democracy. And so, can I start, Marie?
Go, yeah, please.
So we see what's going on in the United States today. Could you give us kind of a view of is democracy under attack all over the world, or is this a unique thing just to the U.S.?
Well, it's certainly not unique in the US to have an illiberal, and I think it's increasingly apparent, authoritarian minded president or head of government seeking to dismantle democracy and create an authoritarian regime. This has happened in more or less incremental fashion by a process that I called the autocrat's 12-step program originally Venezuela in 1999, when Chavez came to power, and then, over a decade following before Maduro even succeeded to the presidency in Venezuela. In Turkey under Recep Tayyip Erdogan, in Hungary under Viktor Orban. I think it's been happening now over a more than 10-year process under Narendra Modi. In India, I think Mexico has been creeping in this direction. Um, and one could cite other democracies as well, some of which have recovered, at least partially, as in Poland. some of which have kicked out the authoritarian transgressors. It's part of a global pattern, but it hasn't happened everywhere. And I think our Western European colleagues, at least so far, have been better able to resist it. And I think Australia and Canada have resisted it. So it's not happening everywhere.
What, look, we're going to get into the U.S. here very, very shortly, but what impact is what's going on in the U.S.? What impact is that having for democracies in Europe and Canada and other places who've been able to resist it?
Well, I think the impact on our more stable and committed democratic allies is one of growing anxiety about the future of the liberal international order, not to mention, in the case of Europe, the future of NATO as a result of Trump's lusting ambitions to not just make Greenland more secure against potential Russian or Chinese mischief, but to own Greenland and wrest it from Danish sovereignty. So I think they are increasingly anxious and worried. But I think the m- the more ominous thing for democracy itself is that the model is spreading, and people like Bukele in El Salvador feel emboldened by Trump's authoritarianism. Bolsonaro did in Brazil. A lot of people are elected leaders or aspiring politicians are trying to model Trump in one way or another and think they can ride that model to more or less absolute power. So Trumpism, I think, is not only degrading democracy in the United States, it's providing a kind of permissiveness and a certain model that is degrading democracy globally.
Dr. Diamond, I mean, you have spent your life's work devoted to studying democracy, um, the rise and the fall of democracies globally. So I'm wondering what it's like personally for you to be in this moment in the United States, where, as you say, the Trump administration continues to degrade democracy.
Well, I think psychologically, you can yield to despair and either, you know, just kind of curl up with a blanket and be depressed. You can leave the country, seek to get another passport, and emigrate, which I think a small but growing number of Americans are doing. Or you can fight, you can resist, and try and recover our democracy. So it's alarming, if a person like myself were to really kind of dwell on it from a certain perspective, perhaps stocked with quite a bit of Johnny Walker Black, it could be just depressing. But we don't have time for depression. We don't have the luxury of depression. This thing is very far from lost. I kind of disagree with Robert Kagan in this, all of the great scholar of political history, who had a stunning uh, uh, set of observations recently on one of your peer podcasts on the political scene in the New Yorker, who was really kind of close to despairing. I'm not there. I think that Trump's poll numbers are declining. I think, well, Senator Tester probably has some sense of what his Republican colleagues in the Senate or former colleagues really think in private. So that's a resource that could be activated at some point. You see growing signs of resistance. So for me, there's just no time for despair. We need to analyze this vigorously and forthrightly, and we need to mobilize to contain this and defeat it.
You're 100% correct. I mean, the folks that I have talked to, and I haven't talked to a lot of them, quite frankly, but the ones I've talked to, who will say on the side that, yeah, what's going on here isn't making any sense. But they've got all sorts of excuses like, well, there's going to be a primary coming, so I can't do anything, or the courts will take care of the problem, which you have seen and we've all seen it isn't necessarily been the truth. So what's failed? I mean, the truth is that the Constitution is pretty clear on three co-equal branches of government, and it's also very clear for the last year that the Senate and the House are do nothing more than rubber stamp policies coming out of the administration. Um, so is that the problem? Is the problem is that Congress hasn't stepped up because they're afraid of political ramifications or safety, or is it that the system has bounced around for 250 years and we've just been lucky?
I think that there is some greater validity in your final observation than we'd really like to admit to ourselves that we have been fortunate not to have a deeply authoritarian figure as president of the United States. Probably the closest we came was Nixon at the end of his presidency, when he was really increasingly desperate before he was forced to resign. But you had periods under FDR and so on, and under Lincoln when the country was at war, when presidents felt they had to accumulate and exercise more discretionary power than would be normal, and then some felt maybe it was constitutional or appropriate. But we don't have anything like that national emergency now. What we have that we've never had before is an authoritarian president. So what's failed, first of all, is the Constitution does have flaws. It has serious flaws. It's much too difficult to remove a president. You know how South Korea was able to remove an authoritarian president who tried to suspend the parliament? Once the National Assembly was able to reconvene, it's a unicameral body, and impeach him, there was no other group of partisan legislators that had to rule on whether to convict him or not. President Yoon was tried and convicted by the Constitutional Court, an independent body. There's a body of thought that says, now with this accumulating uh, disgrace of presidential pardons being bought and sold, that we should amend the Constitution to remove the power of pardon from the presidency. And, one could go on and on. I think what's failed in part, Senator, is that our system of partisan primaries uh, really makes it difficult for members of Congress to stand up to a figure in their own party that they fear could end their political career. And so we need to change the electoral system. It's not coincidental that the one Republican senator, who I suspect you got to know a little bit, Lisa Murkowski, who has most often, most forthrightly stood up to Donald Trump as recently as her visit to Greenland, where she said, "No way are we going to allow this violation of international law and the American interest." Lisa Murkowski comes from the state in the United States whose electoral system of ranked choice voting, combined with nonpartisan primaries, a pooled primary where the top four candidates go to the general election and use ranked choice voting, is the electoral system that would give dissident Republicans the greatest immunity against being, defeated in the primary and therefore be vulnerable to intimidation. So we have institutional changes we need to make our democracy more resilient.
I gotta tell you, Professor, I would love to say, you're just not right on that. But unfortunately, the facts don't back up me saying you're just not right on that. The truth is Lisa Murkowski is a Republican. She sees a lot of things different than I do as a Democrat. But in the end, she is willing to challenge the president, and she's willing to go back by the old saying that our foreign policy ends at the shore's edge when it comes to politics, and we all join together. But that's just my assessment. I think you're spot on.
But Professor Diamond, I mean, the very first time that I heard you speak in person was at a Mansfield Center event in Missoula, and you really changed and formed my thinking on this very thing, on nonpartisan primaries and ranked choice voting. And so, for people who maybe don't understand it very well, I'm wondering if you could just give a brief synopsis of why you're such a proponent for those two reforms.
Sure. Well, the idea of nonpartisan primaries is very simple. Instead of having a Republican primary, a Democratic primary, maybe a Libertarian primary, where one candidate emerges and then goes on to the general election, and the others are defeated and disappear. In this case, because I don't like the way it works in California, where only two candidates are nominated and proceed to the general election. I think that narrows the field too early and unfairly. But in Alaska, the top four finishers go on to the general election and appear on the ballot in the general election. And then ranked choice voting is used to choose a winner. And how does that work? Instead of voting for a single candidate, people rank their choices like they do in the Academy Awards, or, maybe in a beer tasting contest, 1, 2, 3, 4, which are the best. Or with four candidates, you just need to rank your top three preferences. And if someone wins a majority of first preference votes, that's fine. That person is elected. But if no one does so, what happens is the person with the lowest number of first preference votes is eliminated, and you have an instant runoff. And then their votes are the second preferences of their voters are redistributed to the remaining three candidates. And that process of instant runoff continues until someone wins a majority of votes. And what that does is it requires the candidates to appeal more broadly, and uh, makes it impossible for someone who's just trying to appeal to a narrow base of voters that might be a strong 40%, but not a broader majority. It makes it impossible for them to win. And it enables a candidate who you know has broader bipartisan support, maybe even to come from behind, as Lisa Murkowski did in the instant runoff process, and prevail because she's the candidate that the majority of voters would prefer. I personally think it's more democratic. I think it makes elections more inclusive and interesting. And it's certainly the system that would be most likely to kind of marginalize extremists and embolden moderates who want to do the right thing.
And I can tell you unequivocally, the number of moderates in either side, Republican or Democrat, are just about non-existent. Quite frankly, they
That's
don't exist.
certainly shrinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely shrinking. Yep.
So, Professor Diamond, I know you've talked about this next period we're entering in the US as a high stakes period. And while you've said there hasn't been a single break glass moment yet, it does feel like we're the frog in the water that is heating up and heating up and heating up. And so I'm wondering, for you, what are you watching for that you would consider to be a break glass moment here in the US?
Well, I hope we're not the frog in the water, because with that metaphor, the water heats up so gradually that the frog just eventually boils or drowns. Um, so I don't want Trump's transgressions to be too incremental any longer. I think the country needs a very hard slap in the face so that it can rally against his intensifying authoritarianism and irresponsibility. I think one potential break glass moment would be if he really were to be so crazy and so destructive of the American interest as to use military force to try and take Greenland. Uh, it's so insane. I actually don't think he'll do it. But he's doing a lot of damage to the transatlantic alliance through the escalating pattern of intimidation, trying to pressure the Europeans to sell them Greenland, and now imposing these escalating tariffs if they don't do so. So this kind of madness of beating up on our allies, maybe eventually this will get some number of Republicans in the Senate and a few in the House to say this can't go on any longer. I think a second one would be potentially this escalating pattern of deployment of abusive, crude, untrained, um, and really authoritarian, both in behavior and appearance, federal forces, particularly the Immigration Customs and Customs Enforcement (ICE) forces, to American cities in a way where the the escalating pattern of deadly violence just says, you know, this can't go on. But I don't. Uh, I don't see and violation of an explicit constitutional court order, I think might represent that, or a theft of ballot boxes by federal forces, seizure of ballot boxes in November. But the literal definition of a break glass moment is when Republicans in Congress finally say, this can't go on. And if he doesn't stop, we're going to impeach him and remove him from office. And I kind of wonder what that would be. I'm not sure I can conceptualize it at the moment.
We've seen a lot of things happen so far that I quite honestly thought would be a break glass moment already, and it just kind of went by. I mean,
January 6th.
January 6th, tariffs. I mean, there are some people I served with that after the Capitol was attacked, uh, said before it was attacked, they said, "Yeah, Biden stole the election." After it was attacked, they said, "Well, he didn't," and now they're back on the "he stole the election" bullshit. So it's just it is amazing to me. But the tariff thing is a prime example too. The Constitution is clear, but yet Congress goes, "Ah, what the hell? We'll just let it happen." And the impacts of this are bad on business, which Republicans were supposed to be pro-business. It's bad on consumers, which will take you out in an election, and it's bad for the country. It just drives me nuts. But Congress is silent.
Well,
And
let me say, I think one of the most important decisions the Supreme Court will make in the next few years, or in the previous few years, looking back, is on the question of whether the president has virtually unlimited unilateral power to impose tariffs. It seems to me this is an extraordinary abuse and violation of the Constitution. And after all, Senator, I think you know well that the branch of government that appears first in the U.S. Constitution is not the executive; it's the legislature, the Congress. And so, if the Congress won't stand up, I hope the Supreme Court will stand up and say the president doesn't have this absolute discretionary power just to impose tariffs on other countries out of personal pique whenever he wants to with no congressional approval. And that would, I think, these tariffs are they are a dimension of his intimidating global and arbitrary intimidating global power. So I hope that the Constitutional Court, our Supreme Court, will do the right thing.
as do I. Um, but sometimes I wonder. So this
Well, they haven't wrapped themselves in glory in terms of defending these principles so far, as in the decision that the president has virtual absolute immunity for anything he does as president.
So is there one thing, I mean, I'm sure you get this question all the time. It's probably our top question. What can we be doing? I'm sick of writing letters. My calls aren't going through. What can we do? What can we do? And so you said at the very beginning, Professor Diamond, we need to act. There's no time for depression. So is there one specific thing collectively that we can all be doing right now?
Well, I think there are a number of things. In the short term, I do think that peaceful protests matter. And one of the reasons why we've landed in the trouble we're in is because in Minneapolis now, people are so angry, and you may actually have outsiders with their own agendas intruding and taking advantage. The opposition to uh, ICE and Trump's authoritarianism has abandoned nonviolent discipline, and you're seeing some actions that I think open the door to greater uh, coercion from the federal government. So remaining peaceful is absolutely crucial, but protesting has a value. That's the first thing. Second of all, people need to come out and vote in the primaries this year and then in November in very large numbers to however they think is the best way to communicate this, that this is not permissible and they won't support it uh, in electoral terms. I would put a high emphasis for a state like Montana on changing the rules of the game to be more inclusive and more favoring of moderation, compromise, and democratic commitment. Every state has the ability to implement nonpartisan primaries and ranked choice voting. I think, as I recall correctly, Montana is one of the states that has the voter initiative. And so maybe Montanans could look at their political system and say, we're trapped in this downward spiral of polarization. Uh, let's adopt something that's fairer and more inclusive, and will give our elected political leaders, both at the state and congressional level, more space and more incentive to do the right thing.
So I do want to ask you about the elections because there has been this the White House is calling it a joke that has been said aloud several times. And that is that the president has out loud questioned the need for midterm elections on multiple occasions now. And we talked to former Trump advisor Miles Taylor recently, and he said, hey, the joke is the tell. When he's joking about something, he's not actually joking about something. So are you worried about a free and fair election this year?
I'm not worried that he will cancel the election. I don't think that's feasible. But I am worried that he will continue to take steps to try to undermine the freedom, fairness, and integrity of the election. He's already done that with his executive order purporting to forbid, mail-in voting or so on and so forth. But of course, that's ridiculous. States have the ability to set their own rules for, how ballots will be cast and so on and so forth, as long as the ballot is secret and everybody has access to it. And Congress could set some nationwide standards, but only by legislation, not by executive decree. So I don't think that's going to hold up in the courts. What most worries me is that in a somewhat close election, I could easily see him using the expanding number of poorly trained and, you know, in some ways very unrestrained and undisciplined ICE forces or, even federal troops to do what he has threatened, which is seize ballot boxes. And once the ballot boxes come under federal control of I don't know whoever, because maybe the Department of Justice or the Department of Homeland Security. We don't have a National Electoral Commission. Who knows what might happen to them? Are there going to be independent observers with 24-hour eyes on them? So, but I think this can only work for Trump to declare, a state of emergency or to, you know, uh, to use federal troops under the Insurrection Act around election time if it's reasonably close. And this kind of intervention could swing the election by maybe doing it in a few congressional districts or two or three states. Even Trump and even the federal government doesn't have uh, the resources to do it simultaneously in 10 or 15 states. So I think a lot of this will depend on how big the blue wave is and what the mood of the country is at that point and what the backbone of the Supreme Court is in the decisions it makes. But, if it overturns the Voting Rights Act soon and enables the southern states to more ferociously gerrymander for partisan advantage, that may further embolden Trump. I would say, I believe we will have a sufficiently fair election uh, to enable the will of the voters to prevail in November. And I am pretty confident that will result in a Democratic House. And it's looking now barely conceivable that the Senate could change as well. But I think we can't relax. We can't take anything for granted. And we need to be vigilant and we need to be organizationally and legally prepared to defend the integrity of the electoral process because he doesn't value free and fair elections.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the House is, if it's a free and fair election, if people are diligent, make sure that they ensure that. But I absolutely think the Senate's in play, and I'll tell you why I think that is because a lot of these policies, particularly on the tariffs, particularly on the big beautiful bill, whatever it was called, that was passed back in June or July, have incredibly negative impacts on Republican areas of this country. And if the and, you can buy off people with $12 billion here and there, but the truth is, in the end, people know that that's not sustainable over the long haul. And he's trying to do it both in agriculture and in healthcare. He's trying to buy them off for a while till after the election. And, sure, we'll take the money, but the truth is that it's not a solution. It's a Band-Aid. It's a patch. It's trying to buy people off. It's something that we shouldn't be doing. We should be looking for long-term solutions, but that's just my opinion.
Well, it's mine as well. And if you look what's happening to affordability, to the cost of living, particularly in food prices, um, you see one dimension of this. If he keeps raising tariffs, it's only going to be so long before the importers who are bringing in these tariff goods feel they have to pass on more of the cost of this to the consumer just to stay alive. And so prices are going to rise, inflation's going to rise. If he'll get a new Fed chairman in May, and then he'll pressure that person to lower interest rates to a degree that may spike inflation. I don't think this is going to go well for him.
Can I ask you one question before I turn it back to Maritza? And this may be way out of your wheelhouse, Professor, but the reserve currency to me means that the economies of the world flow through the United States because the US dollar is reserve currency. What do you think the chances of losing that status are, and maybe it goes to the yuan or something else?
Uh, in the near term, I don't think it will just be a sudden collapse. It will be a gradual shift of the world to probably a basket of other currencies. As you said, the Chinese yuan, the renminbi, and probably the euro in particular. But I already think we're seeing deals that China's making to clear transactions in its own currency. And so there's a subtle process of erosion, I think, that's already underway. And we keep going down this path, and I think it'll just accelerate over time.
Okay, so I do wanna ask you back to, like, big picture solutions. 2 things. First of all, I've seen polling, several studies that suggest that a majority of Americans, especially young Americans, just don't place a high value on democracy anymore. And I know we've talked on this podcast about civics education, but how do we turn that around and teach our children and the youth in America that we can't take democracy for granted?
Uh, well, first of all, civics education can't just be a classroom experience, although I do think classroom instruction has fallen down. The school systems have fallen down in this regard. It's got to be something that they're seeing and experiencing in their social media feeds on TikTok and uh, Reddit and a lot of other, you know, the fusillade of short burst information and even entertainment that they're getting on their social media feeds. So I think we need to be much more creative and multidimensional in how we are designing and delivering messages about why it matters for your life and your future as a young person to live in a political system where you have freedom, you value freedom, right? Freedom of expression, where your rights can be protected, and where you can turn out a bad and abusive leader who is destroying your future economically and otherwise. And I think we can, we haven't been creative in delivering these messages. And then, secondly, I think we need to revive the political system of democracy through reforms that make choice more meaningful and more interesting. I think ranked choice voting has the ability to do this, and that invite them that make political participation attractive to them. Because right now the system looks very stale to them, very rigged, very uninteresting. And the Democrats have a lot to account for themselves by trying to foist an 80-plus-year-old president of clearly diminishing capacity on the American electorate a second time and uh, intimidate in, I think, seriously undemocratic fashion potential challengers from even thinking about running. Because, oh, if we don't cling to Joe Biden, his clearly diminishing capacity notwithstanding, we might lose to Trump. So we can't allow competition. We can't allow challenges. We can't allow, an open field. And I think this was, well, read Jake Tapper's book on the subject. It was really a disgraceful passage in the history of the Democratic Party. The problem we are in is not a one party problem. I think the senator knows this too intimately. And so, each in our own political circles, in our own parties, and in our own states and communities, need to think about how we can revive and reform democracy to make it more open, more participatory, more choice, more democratic, and more appealing to young people.
He's been
Uh,
talking a lot about that recently.
yeah, but I just Marisa knows this because she helped me send it off. But I just did a speech that's going to be uh, aired on the 20th and in Billings, and I talked about self-reflection in both parties. They need to take a look at what they're doing and ask themselves, "Are you really doing things that are important for this country?" Because I think both parties can say, you know what, we can do better, and they can do a hell of a lot better. There's no doubt about that.
Okay, so the other thing that drives me crazy as we look to the future and we talk about the electorate is just the increase in mis and disinformation and real fake news. And even just this weekend on Meet the Press, I heard one of the cabinet officials say that he had asymmetric information, which is just the new alternative fact. And so you did this study, you were a researcher on this study that has stuck with me, Professor, and it was called the America in One Room. And you talked about how it basically just incorporated more public deliberation, and the outcomes of this study gave me great hope. So I'm wondering if you could just tell our listeners a little bit about that project and what we can learn from it to not only promote more unity, but just a more informed electorate on actual facts.
Well, this starts from the idea that when Americans talk to one another face to face, either as we're doing now virtually or in person, but the online deliberative platform we have is pretty good in facilitating this. You know, the deep divides can diminish and yield to both common sense and, the instinct for greater civility and respect when you're talking to a specific human being and looking them in the eye rather than, shouting at them abstractly on social media. The deliberative poll puts a random sample of the American people and brings them together physically or online, or of any community. You can do it in Billings if you want, and you can do it in Ireland or Uganda or anywhere. And you take a random sample of a community, a state, a country, and you put a set of issues to them. And the key is that you start with neutral information that's been vetted by different experts as a kind of floor of common information that isn't symmetric, asymmetric. It's just really, you know, uh, diverse experts can agree this is a factual basis of information. And then you put questions to them about the economy, immigration, healthcare, how our democracy should be designed. We did one of these deliberative polls on democratic reform in the United States. And you say, would you prefer universal health care for all? Here are the pro arguments. Here are the con arguments. What do you think of the idea of, giving every baby born $10,000 and ultimately in a savings account for college or something? Here's the pro, here's the con. What do you think of ranked choice voting? Here's how it works. Now, would you rather have that as an alternative to our different system? And you let people reason together, deliberate together. They may not come to unity. Uh, we can't expect that. We shouldn't demand that. Sometimes you'll see uh, voters, gravitate in a certain direction, in a common direction, or narrow their differences by coming to the middle. But usually, you see some degree of movement toward greater reason and often toward a more moderate position away from the extremes. But you know what you always see in every single poll we've done, in every single deliberative exercise we've done? You see a visible, appreciable, and quite statistically significant reduction in what we call affective polarization. Now, that's a fancy academic term for emotionally, how much do you dislike or even hate the people who favor the other party? And we measure that when the people start before they start deliberating, and we measure it when they're done. And so what this tells us, Lyndon Johnson, his famous phrase, "Come, let us reason together." That's was his invitation to the members of the Congress. Now, he often did it by twisting their arms as a form of reason. But this is literally, "Come, Americans, let's put our, biases and anger aside and deliberate together and see if we can narrow our differences and drain some of the venom and toxicity out of our politics." So I think it's got great promise for uh, making our society, our democracy, our political system more governable again, by making us less emotionally polarized and distrusting.
And isn't it true that somebody who wants to be an authoritarian leader, that division is an incredible advantage to them if they can get
No,
people
of
to
course.
yeah.
Um, those populists I was talking about, Erdogan, Orban, Chavez, Modi, um, all the others, Bolsonaro, it is part of their style and strategy to polarize, right? Polarization serves their authoritarian mission. And so, one of the things I've been saying about how you end a authoritarian challenge to democracy is that the opposing party has to run a different type of strategy, not to feed into the polarization and mimic it with all of these juvenile types of phrases and offensive language and so on, but to transcend it by creating a bigger tent.
Man, you are spot on. You are spot on. Are you teaching courses? Because I'm gonna move to Stanford and take one. Can I do that?
I'm teaching one right now on democratic development, but I knew you'd like what I just said because that's what you tried to do as a senator. So yeah, sorry that it came to this temporary.
You know, it worked out just fine for me. I don't know how it worked out for the country, but it worked out fine for me because I get to do it, and that's called farming, so it's good. It's good.
Oh, God bless you.
Well, Dr. Larry Diamond, we just want to thank you so much for your time and your knowledge, and we appreciate not only you being here, but all the work you've done.
Well, thank you. I love the big sky country. I'll come back and visit you sometime.
Please do. Please come back again. We'd love to do it eyeball to eyeball, as you were just talking about, instead of over Zoom, and we can talk about all sorts of stuff. But I do wish you the best. Thank you for doing what you do. I think it's really important, really important work that adds value to our democracy. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
You
Someone
got a
like
lot.
that.
Man. I mean, truthfully, uh, what he said was he kind of confirmed what we kind of already know, that this stuff's going on, and we need to stand up and be Americans, not Democrats or Republicans. And I think it's really important if we're going to salvage a democracy and keep opportunity for our kids and our grandkids. It's just and look, he's I'm sure he must have certain policies that are bad, but man, I certainly didn't hear much today. You know,
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, I appreciate his view of things, and I appreciate that it comes with some ideas for solutions and how we reform and get better and change. Some things were interesting to me, like even in the end when he talked about how, the other side can't match the juvenile behavior. I mean, we have seen. I know that a lot of people have found great joy in Governor Gavin Newsom's approach to handling Trump, and it is amusing, but what Dr. Diamond is saying is that's not the way forward, and so, I think yeah, I think that we need to take a good look at democracy, and I really do believe that I certainly know I've taken our democracy for granted a
oh,
lot, 'cause
look,
that's all I've known.
here's what I compare it to. I live about 20 miles north of the White Rocks and the Missouri River, and never ever valued them. And people come from all over the world to see them. And it's the same thing with democracy. I've grown up with it my whole life. I've taken it for granted. And there's all sorts of places in this world where people are beaten down. They don't have any choices. They don't have any freedom. They don't have any privacy. I've had that for the most part my whole life. Has there been some intrusions on that? Of course there have been. But for the most part, it's been pretty damn good. And we've got a group of people, and the folks who wrote the project 2025, I have read where they don't want democracy. They want an authoritarian government, and that's why they wrote that, and that's why it's being implemented as we speak. And people need to stand up, not because they're a Democrat or Republican, because they're American, and say, "Come on, man, we still value freedom. We still value privacy. We still like to have our civil liberties." And, and the people still need to be running the show, not the politicians. And so it's important.
You bring up Project 2025. I wasn't even maybe gonna talk about this episode, but I've been reading, this morning something that came up in one of my group chats, and it's from the Heritage Foundation, which authored Project 2025. And this is I'll just put it up here. This is, kind of a new proposal for what it calls Saving America by Saving the Family Foundation for the next 250 years. And there's a lot in here, but it talks about getting rid of no fault divorce. It also talks about we need a societal commitment to revive the institution of marriage. It talks about getting rid of, like, scaling back on student loan programs so that students don't get burdened with debt, not because we don't want them burdened with debt, but because then they put off getting married. So I thought this was kind of an interesting post. They just released this report. I will be reading through it. I'm going to write a lot of thoughts down, and hopefully we can talk about it in one of our future episodes because a lot of people said don't pay attention to Project 2025 because it's not going to happen, and it's happening.
Yeah, it absolutely is happening. And I would say that you can talk about family values all you want, but if the leader of your party cheated on his wife when she was pregnant, I think that speaks a lot to his family values, quite honestly. And so, um, you know, we are where we are, and we're here probably not surprisingly to some, but uh, in the end, I feel pretty uncomfortable with where we're at right now. You
Yeah.
take a look at what happened in Minnesota, your home ground, and I give you a lot of gas about being from Minnesota. But the truth is, uh, the leaders are saying, "Don't believe your lying eyes. This is what really happened." When there's video of this lady getting shot at point blank range, a US citizen, a 37-year-old female with kids, and and the leadership is saying what this dude did, and in fact, I'll take it even a step further. A person that I know that's going to college said there's a professor that said, "No, no, no, she was wrong. She used her car as a weapon of mass destruction." When you got people in brown suits and masks walking down a neighborhood and you stop to see what the hell's going on and that costs you your life because one of those people in those brown suits shot you, we got problems. We got
So
big
a
problems.
professor said that to an entire class.
That's my understanding. So,
Yeah, I think
is it, I mean, people need to get out of their echo chambers and they need to look at stuff and they need to analyze it and they need to use something that's very seldom found anymore. It's called common sense and say, does this make any sense? And I've got to tell you, I didn't see any lives that were threatened there by that lady. I didn't see anybody getting hit. I saw an ace agent walk over to the car after she was unconscious and blew through into the next car, walk over, not run, walk over, take a look, saunter back, and about halfway back said, "Call 911." This person had just been shot in the head. I mean, look, it,
after he also said called her a fucking bitch.
well, I mean, I don't know if he dropped the F bomb or not, but
He did.
truth, I'm not sure that maybe he said that, maybe it was the officer beside him, but the truth is it's one of the 2 said it. And, it's unacceptable, and for the Vice President of the United States to just go out and gaslight people, that is unacceptable. Unacceptable. And if people don't make their voices heard in the next election, I don't know. I guess we kiss her goodbye. That's all I got to say.
Well, there's your call-in, folks. Speaking of common sense, seems to me you're wearing 3 T-shirts, but let's talk about your hat.
Easy, easy, easy. Now, you know that I'm a clothes horse and that I'm really
The
high up.
fashion icon of North Central
There
Montana.
you go. And I'll tell you what this is.
Oh,
This is a
SK.
business, electronics. It's a business in Western Montana that does a lot of really good work, employs a lot of really good Montanans. What can I say? They're a good outfit, and I think that they do good work. And so I got the hat, so I wore it.
Looks great. All right, we wanna thank you all for being with us. We are going to be back, for a live episode on Wednesday. You will actually be in DC if all the flights go according to plan. We will be doing an episode, on the anniversary of the Citizens United case, the decision that really changed a lot in our country.
Yeah, we didn't talk with that with the professor, but that's another problem with our elections, in my opinion. Too damn much money going into them that could be used to fix schools or courthouses or roads or whatever. And instead, we're spending it on elections that they employ a few people, but other than that, I don't see a lot of benefits to the voters. So, just a
So we will
sidebar.
talk about that
Side,
on Wednesday at
yep.
more length. Again, we want to thank Dr. Larry Diamond for joining us. We want to thank our friends at Pearl Jam for letting us use their music. Oh my gosh, wait, quick tangent. I saw Song Sung Blue, which is a movie about this Neil Diamond tribute act, and I had no idea Pearl Jam played such an instrumental role in this musician's career in Milwaukee. So, hey, nice job,
Well,
Pearl Jam.
I didn't know that at all. No,
Yeah.
that's pretty.
So nice job, Pearl Jam. Thanks, Eddie Vedder. We want to thank all of you, our listeners. And you can find us here on Substack, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube. You can shoot us an email at groundedpcast@gmail.com. We just want to thank you so much. And have a meaningful Martin Luther King Day. We'll chat again soon.
Alex.